Oh, hello, my friends. Hello, my life warriors, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Day In, Day Out podcast. Woo! Today on the podcast, I'm very lucky, privileged to have John Mendez. He is a Connecticut based realtor and investor, helping people build wealth through real estate in Connecticut. CT. One of the things I did discover about him, and I'm having to bring this up, he didn't know which was the best Christmas action movie of all time. I dropped hints to him that it took place in a tower. I dropped place the next episode, like the next film took place in an airport. And I dropped hints. The third film took place in New York City. But yeah, John's like, I haven't seen it. Like, John, John. We cannot, like, no one's perfect in this world. But God damn it, sir. You've got to get out there and watch a little bit of Die Hard. If you've got Disney Plus, I don't even know. If it's on Disney Plus, damn well watch it. If it's on, like, it's on Amazon, damn well watch it. Before this year is done, you better come back to me and say you've watched Die Hard. How are you today, anyway?
Thanks, Levi, for the amazing introduction. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad, I'm able to just share this conversation. And in my defense, when I think of Christmas, I think of the Grinch. I think of A Christmas Carol. I think of Ebenezer Scrooge. I think of all these people. So he kind of threw me off. And then he mentioned New York City, and I thought Home Alone. So it was a pretty fair guess. Home Alone takes place in New York City. Home Alone is a great movie. Everyone knows it is. So in my defense, it's not like I had a bad guess. Bad guess as my answer. It was a pretty strong guess. I just didn't know where you were going.
Okay, you know what? If I was in the same room with you right now, I would throw a brick. Home Alone this.
Good thing I got good reflexes. You might miss.
I'm sure. Getting it from the basketball court and yeah, playing football, no doubt. But yes. Now, I have to ask. Now, what was the thing? What took you down this realm of real estate and investment? How did you get started? Because hey, dare I say it, you're a young looking chap.
Yeah.
You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah. So should I age myself? Well, that's. I think I'm at an age where I can still age myself, and people won't take offense to it, right? So 21 years young, right? 21 years young. I turned 21 in September. So what got me into real estate is I went to college, and the two reasons I went to college, just to give you a little bit of context, were to network and learn how to live on my own. Right. I was in the School of Business over at UConn, and I was studying, and then the pandemic came around my second semester of college, still my freshman year, and I still remember like I was walking home, or to my dorm at least. I just finished hanging out with my friends, and we all made like a bet. Like two or three of us were like, "Yeah, we'll be back after this semester. I mean, after this break." The other two or three were like, "Yeah, John, I don't think we're gonna come back." And you're like, we'll see, we'll be back. And next, we never ended up coming back. And so fast forward a little bit, my fall semester of my sophomore year,
Mm.
it was around right before it in August, right before it started. One of my friends introduced me to, he wanted me to invest in Tesla. He knew I was getting a college refund, and Tesla was doing I think it was a 5-1 stock split at that time. If you don't quote me, I think it was a 5-1 stock split. I didn't know what that even meant, right? I never invested before. And from there, I was like, hey, why aren't you investing? And he was like, because right now I don't have the money to. I have to take care, because it was him and his older sister, and his older sister's daughter living together. His parents were in Haiti, and so he didn't have the money because was filling in shoes.
Mm.
And so, I was like, he's told me about this opportunity despite him not being able to. And when you usually come from scarce backgrounds, a lot of people like to keep their cards close to their chest. And I was like, it means something. And he's a finance guy, so I trusted his word and I invested in it. And then fast forward a little bit in November, that kind of sparked, it planted a seed in me. And I found myself in Barnes and Noble in November, and I picked up 3 books, right? First book was Rich Dad Poor Dad. Second book was Index Funds for Dummies, and the third book was a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it's a good book. It's not as great as it seems, but it does its job in shifting your mindset to see that there's another way of viewing the world that's
Mm.
not being taught in school. So after that fall semester finished, between the winter break, I started watching. tons of YouTube videos, YouTube University, double speed podcasts, reading books. Like I was just burning through information. And out of all the different ways to get into stuff, real estate was the main one that caught my interest. So I tried to get into wholesaling. I bought a $500 class. I ended up going through with it, filed for my LLC, got my logo, my domain name, everything else ready to get going. And for wholesaling, there's like a couple states where it might not be allowed in, but it was allowed in Connecticut at that time. I knew that I had to start reaching out to attorneys to make sure I had a good attorney on my side to start closing deals.
Mhm.
And I spoke up, like about four or five, and none of them knew, what I was really talking about. They were like, hey, yeah, 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 whatever. Scratch me, like brush me off a little bit. But there's one guy who seemed like really knowledgeable on this subject. He was like, oh yeah, you can't do that in Connecticut. It's against the law, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And in my head, he was a professional at that time. So I was like, okay, maybe this idea of real estate isn't gonna work out. I was kind of bummed for a little bit. And then I started up the spring semester, and it was just like, I really couldn't focus on school. It's like I seen the light. It's like I can't unsee it now. There's that whole personal finance entrepreneur world out there, and all these books and all these things that I'm learning that's not being taught in school. And it's like it's not like I could just shut my eyes and not see that stuff, that other way of learning, and that all that information that's out there. And so I was like, you know what? I'm gonna start my real estate classes. I needed to have a license to get into wholesaling. Quick disclaimer: you can wholesale in Connecticut without a license. At that time, I just was following what the attorney's bad advice, who clearly wasn't an investor.
Yeah.
Um, and so I ended up signing up for my real estate classes. Never showed up, stopped showing up to my college classes that spring semester, my sophomore year, and then I decided to drop out. And the I would think 2 weeks after I turned 20, I finally got my real estate license. And so that's the story of how I got into real estate.
Mm. Like, does it, do you wish you came across this knowledge just as you were like in your final year, like your senior year of high school? So it would have basically either saved you time or money, uh, rather than sort of going off to college, say.
Yeah, so here's the thing with that, right? I think everything happens for a reason. And if you change one thing, it's like the butterfly effect. And so you don't know how things will play out, right? You watch the movies and people go back in time, they tweak one little thing and their whole life could be complete mess, or it might be better, right? But I wouldn't take that chance. I feel like everything is supposed to happen. And um, as long as we're putting the work and being smart and being consistent in due time, right? And this is the path that I'm supposed to be on. And I feel like if I would have skipped college, I would have not have developed personally as much, because that experience of, I still feel like although college itself, the education part of it is kind of a scam unless you need to be a doctor or in a CPA or something like that. But it's like that experience, it's like that being on your own, that adventure, you get to find yourself, and you also don't have the full responsibility of adulthood. So you can be, a lot riskier, experience a lot more without having as much consequences. So you could find yourself if you use college correctly. And if you network, which is one of the main reasons I went to, it just cut short because the pandemic, everyone has on Zoom calls, but it's not like this where we're having a conversation. It's cameras off, the teacher's, giving a class that no one cares about. Everyone's in their bedroom, cameras off, probably sleeping. They just, open their computers just to get credit for being in attendance, right? So it's like there was any networking or anything. So the two reasons I went to school were out. But I genuinely loved it. I was in a couple of fashion shows. I had a 378 my first year. Like I loved the experience. It was great. I met some, great people. I got like a lot of good connections and stuff. So I genuinely enjoyed it for what it was.
Mm.
But I'm also extremely grateful for the pandemic for allowing me the time and the space to be able to, reflect and have all this extra time. And I'm just glad that I used it to actually learn something instead of, letting it pass by. So I think everything played out perfectly. I think in my books, I was able to experience it a little bit, the college experience, but then also become aware of all these different, things in the entrepreneur space, in the personal finance space, in the real estate space. So I think it all played out pretty well. But of course, I would have loved to, um, experience it without the pandemic. But if I had to fully gone through with it, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, and we probably wouldn't even be in this podcast having this conversation right now. So I'm glad it all played out.
Right. It's worked out quite nicely so far. Yeah,
Yeah.
like one of the things I'm always curious about, because I hear from, like, say, reality TV and like stuff like this when it comes to real estate in the United States.
Yeah.
a real estate license. For example, there's a show Selling Sunset, which comes on Netflix. Like don't like this is the thing. I won't lie. I kind of like it's one of my guilty little pleasures. I kind of watch it, and I'll watch it again. But they talk about getting their real estate license, but I haven't like because no one actually says what it entails. How long does it
Yeah.
take to get a real estate license?
So it varies state to state. In Connecticut, it's pretty much the process is kind of similar. The hours may vary depending on what state you're in, but usually something along the lines of you take a real estate course, and then once you take that real estate course, you pass.
Oh,
Then you should at least I'm going based off of what I did in Connecticut. So once you take the real estate course and you pass, then you take that paper and then you have to go to the PCI. You have to mail it out to the PCI, um, and then once they approve, then you're qualified to take the state exam and the national. Pardon me, the state and national exam, which is like somewhat like I think like a 2 hour exam or something like that, depending on what state you're in.
wow.
And then once you pass that, then you have pretty much a license, but you can't do anything with that. From there, you have to then find a brokerage to hang your license, it's called. So
Uh,
whether it's Keller Williams, that's where I decided to go, or Coldwell Banker, Century 21, EXP, then you would hang your license, and then from there, um, that's when you would then technically be able to transact as an agent. But then from there, you also need to get your smart MLS or whatever MLS that you use, the multiple listing service, to get actual access to the market.
mhm.
And then you may have a couple other small fees here and there. Like for me, I know I had to get it's called a super e key. That's how I'm able to connect to the lock boxes on the doors. So
Uh,
there's a fee for that for the most part. But that's pretty much start to finish in a nutshell. And the class itself was 60 hours, and then you probably have to you pass the test, and it takes about 2 weeks to get your paperwork sent out to the PCI. And then once they approve, then you could take your PCI exam anywhere. So I can take my Connecticut exam. I took my Connecticut exam in New York, right?
uh,
Because they had more availability, right? Because I didn't want to wait for Connecticut's availability.
uh,
And right, so I took it in New York and I finally passed that. It took me 3 tries. I didn't study the first 2 tries. And so from the time I finished class, I was probably in May or maybe like May or June. And then I was working like 70 hours. So I didn't even have time to take the exam. So like from May or June when I finished the class to like almost August when I finally actually passed.
mhm.
I didn't study at all really, and like I forgot a lot of the stuff. And most of that stuff, if not all of that stuff, you don't use anyways. Um, when you're actually have your license. So, um, but once I failed the first 2 times, I just happened to have really good memory, so I just memorized the questions, and then from there, passing the test was pretty easy.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah.
So because you've taken your real estate exam like at license in New York, so can you practice in New York and Connecticut, or is it a case of you're just restricted?
Yeah, so although I took the test in New York, that's
Mm.
just the facility. That's the testing center, the testing facility.
Ah,
I took my Connecticut test in the New York facility just because, as I said, it had more availability.
yeah.
But New York is a reciprocal state to Connecticut. So if I have my Connecticut license, I can reciprocate that to New York. I think I just got to file some paperwork and then hang my license with a brokerage over there in New York, and probably pay some other fees. I'm not too sure how it works, but I know New York is not reciprocal to Connecticut. So if I were to get my New York license, and go through the class and everything like that, I would have to then go through the Connecticut class, I'm pretty sure. And then retake all that stuff all over again. So some states are reciprocal one way and not the other. So you have to definitely check in with your state. Like I know Connecticut's reciprocal for like Florida too, and so a couple other states. So
That's weird. That's very
yeah.
okay. Okay. So basically, wow. I you pick a state, like you pick a couple of states, and that is pretty much you stick in those states. Like if
It really depends, honestly, though. Like if you're in the DMV area, a lot of realtors have their DMV license, like Delaware, Virginia, and the Maryland, because they just happen to be pretty close together. But like for me, it's like I wouldn't go into New York because each state does things differently.
Mhm.
And so, and also then too, you have to ask yourself, how far do you really want to drive? For example, like in a lot of southern states, you could cover a lot more ground and it would be easier because a lot of those states are like, for example, like the more countryside states, it's straight roads. But for me, it's like, there's rush hour, it takes like 30 minutes just to get 3 exits over. right? So it's like imagine trying to cover different states. Like good luck with that during rush hour.
Ah. So, what would you say has been sort of like your biggest takeaway, like being qualified now? Uh, because you didn't pass it for the first two times, you passed it
Yeah.
the third time. What was like the sort of like, ah, this is what I need to do?
Honestly, it's they ask the same questions every single time. So it's like I failed the first time, and then like 3 weeks after I took it again, and then like I was like 2 points away. I was like, okay.
Mm,
So like right before the third test, I like studied like the week prior just because as I said, I have pretty good memory. So I just studied the questions and then it gives you an outline of the question that's gonna ask. So I just went to those specific chapters
yeah.
and just looked for the I went to the quiz portion and just looked at the quiz answers and pretty much just studied those. And so when I came back around, it was easy. It's multiple choice anyway, so the test isn't hard.
No, what how I was like trying to like frame the question, excuse me, my apologies,
Mhm.
is like, did it like was there sort of a momentary like a moment where it gave you some sort of clarity of okay, I need to have this mindset to get to get on the board XYZ, or was it a case of right, I need to drop this, pick this up? Was there something clear what came to you in that sort of sense?
Oh yeah, definitely. So something like that happened to me. So around October, there was this training in my office that was being held. It's
Mhm,
called Ignite. And there's this one agent who's she's one of our more successful agents. She's on like a leadership council in our office. So she's like in the like top like 15% of agents or something like that. And what she was in this mastermind call every morning. And she just also happens to always come back to the training, although that training is for like beginners
mhm.
and people that are newer to real estate and not really transacting. She always goes through the training just for like to make sure she touches up on the fundamentals, make sure she still got it. I guess like kind of like Kobe, right? She always working on the fundamentals, right? And so she was in there one time and she dropped a couple links to a couple mastermind calls in the morning, and that was in October-ish. And it wasn't until November I found out like, hey, I got to change my morning routine. And so I got on a couple of these mastermind calls, and that's when like I was able to progress mentally so much further. Like, so networking and masterminding with the right people, I guess that definitely opened my mind up. And then I started realizing, I started scripts practicing, and now I'm hearing the conversation other agents have while they're on the phone and while they're prospecting. And I was listening to their conversations. It was like, yeah, you could tell he doesn't practice. Or you could tell he's not studying in the market. Or you could tell she's not looking into the data, right? Because like a lot of these agents, they don't really work on their craft really at all. There's no like real practice. It's just kind of like they're agents and try to go sell houses.
You know what? I like the fact that you said craft, because there's one thing when you're doing a job or taking part in an activity, and there's another thing when it's a craft. Because
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm working in real estate. It's like, okay, great. It's like, yeah, you clock in, you clock out, and you go. When you have a craft, it's a skill, you know what needs to be worked on, refined, built upon. And what like there is no sort of realm of perfection. It's always like, yeah, trying to get mastery of your craft is a
Yeah.
never-ending journey. And when you're like going, yeah, working on my craft, it doesn't take much to be a good craftsperson in this like day and age. You just need to do a little bit better than the people around you. Like as you said, people like not doing their script, people not doing their research, but be on that next level. Like the lady you mentioned who keeps coming in. Like,
Yeah.
do you like where you see yourself now and where you see yourself, where you like what work you need to do? Like, do you have any idea what that work might look like to you?
Yeah, so full transparency, right? So my main focus now isn't even real estate. It's not real estate at all. So for me, so I got into real estate and I was convinced first year and I was gonna, become, top agent, sell the most houses, come in and I'm some hot shot and get it going. But I started realizing throughout the journey, but one, I was also working on the side also too. So that I didn't factor that in as well. So that was eating away at some of my time.
Mhm.
And then I started a podcast about 3 or 4 months after I got my real estate license. And so I was kind of doing that on the side and I wasn't really focused, right? I was I have the personality. I was working on my skills. I was on the mastermind calls, and I wasn't really making any progress. Wasn't really closing any deals at all. And then it wasn't around till like almost September where I read a book called The Purpose Factor. And that book really got me to start thinking it. And it really like breaks down some like conventional wisdom
Hmm.
and like kind of like debunks it. For example, like follow your passion. So
Right.
the Oxford definition of passion is a barely controllable emotion, right? So when you trade the word passion with its actual dictionary definition, you realize a lot of the advice you have been given is actually terrible advice. Like you shouldn't use a barely controllable emotion to start your business or to fund, be the main effort for your business or the main motivator, right? It's barely controllable. Why would you have something that's not stable be the founding, core principle of everything that we do in life? And that book really opened my mind. Another good quote that I got from the book is like, you could be climbing up the ladder of success and get to the top and then realize that it was against the wrong wall the entire time, right? A lot of us we like competing, we like finding success metrics, and we like accomplishing things, and we kind of get carried away. The dopamine hit, right? We get a little something going, and it gets good, and it starts getting better, and
Mm.
we never takes time to reflect because we're still stuck in that dopamine hit of like, hey, I just hit another goal, I got another raise, whatever it may be, and not realize that your actual life's mission, your actual purpose, wasn't anywhere near in alignment with what you actually had going on. So, yeah, kudos to you for accomplishing everything, but you just kind of wasted your life away and your purpose hasn't been fulfilled. That's why a lot of people have midlife crises, right? They probably have a successful career. They're
Mm.
probably in corporate, making a lot of money, and then they realize, oh, this wasn't supposed to be the main pursuit of everything, the main, driving force behind everything. And so for me, that book opened my mind a lot. And then so I was like, okay, so real estate, I keep procrastinating. I'm not really finding success. What might it be? So I decided to try and open up a social media marketing agency. So I got my logo filed for that, my domain name, my LLC, all that stuff, and I was ready to get that up and going. And then I had one client, and like I'm editing the content for him, and I was like, I don't really like this either, man. I don't know what it is, but I I don't really like this either. And it wasn't until I found out this concept called Ikigai that I realized that, the podcast is really what I want to do, what I want to put all my efforts in and go all out in.
Hmm.
And that's like going into 2023. Like I'm super excited because it's like the first year where it's like there's nothing else that's on my mind besides the podcast. And it's like a boulder was lifted off my shoulder because I'm very creative, and so it's like now it's like all my creativity is being funneled into just one endeavor and not trying to do the real estate and still work on a side job and also do the SMMA and teach social media classes and all this other stuff. And just how could I grow the podcast and I have like absolute focus and clarity on it.
Mm. Does it feel good to have this clarity at this present time?
It feels amazing. It feels like I don't know how to really word it in ways to make really sense of it, but imagine you were driving in a car and it's a stormy night and it's foggy, right? And people have their high beams on, right? You can't really see the lines in between, the lanes are getting a little blurry, but you could just see, 5 feet ahead. And that's kind of how I was driving for the majority. It's like I can only just see 5 feet ahead, right? But now it's like now that I'm not trying to focus on real estate and all these other different side endeavors, it's like there's only the podcast. It's like the sun's out, clear skies. We on a long empty street. I could see down the block around the corner. Like everything's clear now. I could see ahead now. It's not so foggy, right? It feels like all the fog, the brain clog, I guess you could say, the clutter just got organized and filed. It reminds me of a SpongeBob episode where he was like you could see in SpongeBob's brain, and it was like a workplace and everyone's running around, there's a fire, everyone's panicking, running back and forth, and now it's like the workplace in here is organized, it's neat, all the folders are tucked away and everything like that, and it's like, all right, I know this is my mission, this is where I want to be. And so all my focus, my energy is going to how could I grow this and keep this on growing.
Mm. Mm. Like this is the thing. Like I'm glad. I'm happy to hear that. It's a case of, ooh, it. There, there might be some like long road ahead of you, as the Beatles would say, the long and winding road. Uh, so like this is the thing. Like if your mother or father came up to you as or one of your elders came up to you and John, podcast, say right. So like, how long are you going to do this for? It's like going, what would your response be to them?
My response would probably be minimum, at least the next 5 years, at least minimum, right? Because you can be, there's a quote that here we say at Keller Williams, right? That Gary Keller, the founder, says that you could be anywhere you want in 5 years, right? And most people aren't willing to put the time in, right? Most podcasts don't make it past episode 7. Most real estate agents don't make it past year 2, right? It's like all these most 9 out of 10 businesses fail, right? There's all these quotes because people don't stay on, uh, stick with it long enough. And Alex Harmozy had another quote, and it was like, you don't have to be extraordinary, right? You just have to do something ordinary for an extraordinary amount of time, right? So if people just stuck with it more, we would find a lot more people finding success. And for me, if someone were to ask me, "Hey, podcasting, I thought you were in real estate, or I thought you were doing this, like,
Mhm.
what's going to be your next new thing?" And it's like, well, this is it because this is, my, as I said, my ikigai, my reason for being.
Excellent. No, because like this is the thing with regards to the realm of podcasts,
Yeah,
they go, yeah, there's 4 million podcasts out there in the world, and like you go, yes, there is, but no, there isn't. There are because, as you say, normally it's four and done, but like, yeah, I think it's moved up to seven
yeah,
recently. But out of that 4 million, I think there might be about 300,000, maybe 400,000, which are
active.
active. Yeah. So you know what I mean? Like doing the episodes, putting the work in. And like there are some people which do make me chuckle when they go, yes, I'm doing a podcast. I go, great, you're doing a podcast. No problem. Yeah, but it's not growing or it's not being successful. I go, okay, yeah, no worries. How many episodes are you doing? Doing one every 2 months, maybe. It's like, you go, okay, in order to get that sort like in order to get good at anything, you need to put in the practice, you need to put in the reps, get that
Yeah,
working. And like, yeah, I don't think a number of people when it comes to podcasting, just like be an interview podcast like what we're doing, like factual, historic, or like, you know what I mean, just just an entertaining podcast. For example, like Andrew Schwartz, like Flagrant 2, like not
yeah,
Flagrant, they do at least 3 episodes a week on
yeah.
regular, and they do a Patreon podcast, which comes out a month after they've like put it out there. Like, yeah. How many episodes are you currently doing for your podcast? Just how interesting.
Yeah, so right now I'm doing about one a week.
Mhm.
Right. This week actually, like while the day that we're recording. So I'm gonna drop like one a day until Christmas. So today, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then Christmas is gonna be like my wrap-up episode for like 2022 and
Ah,
like take a little bit of clips. And then I'm really contemplating, starting to drop 2 episodes because right now, so I'm at episode 46 that just dropped. And then after today, it'll be 47. And I also have enough interviews recorded now already to last me until like June. So I'm like backed up with interviews that I still have yet to drop. So I found out what happened with me. So I found out about like Podmatch and, Guestio and all these different websites. Like that's within like the same week.
mhm.
And then like everyone just reached out kind of at the same time. So it's like I had a bunch of people that I had to filter through, and so like then I was scheduling interviews and I was like, I didn't have like any blockers set on my scheduler. So
Oh.
it's like it got packed. Yeah, it got packed up pretty quick. So September was a wild month for me. So that month after September, I kind of got like pretty far ahead. And so I may start dropping 2 a week, but it reminds me of the interview where not an interview, a quote. I'm gonna butcher it, but Bruce Lee said something along the lines of, "I fear not the man who knows 10,000 cakes, but the man who practiced one cake 10,000 times." Right? It's like, how many reps can you put in your thing? And like for me, it's like, although I was distracted in real estate, distracted with the social media stuff and the other side endeavors, it's like the podcast is the only thing that I stuck with and been consistent with. But I was just treating it in the background,
Mm,
right? And I was trying to get full-time results with only part-time minimal effort. And I wasn't seeing the reason why my podcast wasn't growing or exploding. I thought if I build it, people will show up. And as you know from being in the podcast space, it's not like that at all. So I was like, December, once I started getting a lot more clarity, it's like, all right, how do I become intentional with this? How do I take this to the next level? How do I turn this something from just a weekly episode to a movement? That's
Mm,
where I want to take it.
yeah. And you got to remember it like this. Put it this way. I've like when I first like started off my podcast, yeah, once a week, then like built momentum, got up to twice a week. And it was like twice a week for all the way up until sort of around about June this year. The reason why
Yeah.
I kind of like I've kind of fallen off, like yeah, new baby girl came into the world, like the whole pregnancy. It's like yeah, so I haven't been able to focus the way I normally would focus. But you've got to look at it this way: if you're doing one, like anyone who's doing one episode a week, if you're doing two, you're doing 2 years work in like you know what I mean. Do three,
Yeah.
you're doing 3 years work, and like with that, it builds exponentially, and you get that you get so much more experience. You get so
Yeah.
much more time to work on your craft, get better having conversations, interacting, and like yeah, if like I like my intention next year when I get back on it and things get a little bit settled,
Yeah.
but just a little bit.
Just a tiny bit, just a
Yeah,
little tiny bit, right?
yeah, but I'll be like looking to get my podcast back up to twice a week. I'm not even looking to get up to 3 times a week to catch up from
Yeah.
things I've missed out on this year. Because when you're in the mix and like you're doing it, like yeah, you it it's something I believe I don't think you'll come across anyone else saying it. You get podcast fit if you, so you'll be able to think more on the fly. You'll be able to have those conversations. You'll be
Hmm.
able to be more relaxed. When there's been a couple of times where it's like, yeah, I've lined up a whole bunch of interviews, so I haven't done anything for a month.
Yeah.
Come back into it, I'm not going, oh wait, oh, got to get the brain working again and everything like this. So yeah, uh,
And
I'm
that same point too. Now that you mention it, like that, I was literally on a phone call like about an hour ago because I went to speaker school. That a guy that here is in my hometown that he that was back in September. Because
yeah.
for me, I knew I wanted to get into the public speaking space, right? So a little more context behind the real estate story.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I had to become credible in something so that people would find my voice valuable in any regard, right? And
Mm,
so while I was pursuing real estate, I was like, okay, I'll just become a top realtor, right? And then I'm going to use that money to start my investing journey as well. But I'm also going to use that credibility as a top realtor to start getting public speaking engagements. Now it's then I started getting speaking engagements from my podcast. And I was like, okay, so that's around that same time in September. So it's like if I'm getting speaking opportunities, which is what I really want to end up doing, speaking, use my voice,
yes.
then and I'm not a top realtor at all. How this doesn't make any sense. So it made me sit there and think. So it's like, do I even need real estate really to get to where I want to get to? And then I realized like, hey, I don't. And then it's like being able to strip myself away from that ego because being a competitive person that I am, I like competing and finding, accomplishing goals for just accomplishing sake,
Mm,
right? And so it's like, okay, I got into real estate, I got to become a top realtor. That's what I was telling myself. And I was just like, I actually don't because my end goal is really public speaking. And that's starting to happen through the podcast, right? And the podcast itself is kind of almost like public speaking, right? So it's like, I was just gonna put all my efforts into kind of doing this. At that time, wasn't all my efforts. It's just like, okay, I'm gonna put a little bit more effort into doing this.
yeah.
And then now, as I said, I read the book, I started getting some clarity, I started looking into some things about finding your purpose and things like that. And so it's like, okay, now it's like full on intentionality now, like actually growing this and being intentional. Like, for example, one thing that I want to do next year is I'm already planning it now. I have 14 speakers confirmed out of 15, but I'm going to do a virtual summit, right? So it's like, as I said, all my creativity, I'm a very creative person. That's how I was going to get, while I was in school, I was going to be in marketing,
And
right?
modest as well.
And so, you know, uh, for me, it's like I get ideas left and right, and they just come to me rapid fire. Like my brain is flying at high speeds all the time, right? And it's like now I had ideas for real estate and for this, and it's like now that it's just one focus, all my idea creating powers is all for one thing. So like 2 weeks ago before we're interviewing, I hosted my first in-person podcast event, Oh, so I did like a live podcast interview and I had like an audience. I ended up bringing like close to 16 people. I planned it in less than 2 weeks. Never planned an event before in my life. So and put it together. Had a couple sponsors to sponsor for like pizzas and stuff like that. And I ended up figuring it out. And it's like, as I said, it's so much easier to drive back to that highway analogy that I was saying. Now that the fog is gone and I can see further down the road, it's so much clearer now. It's so much more purposeful, so much more efficient now because it's like it's not wasted brain space and wasted brain energy trying to figure out how to grow all these things at the same time. It's just one thing. And so it's like it's a lot easier to start making moves and to start moving forward and progressing and act on the things that you said you were going to act on.
Yeah. You can execute with precision rather than
Yeah.
sort of whacking at the weeds.
Or
Say,
shotgunning it, right? It's like a sniper now.
yeah, there you go. Get that kill shot on. Like, yeah. Many of your goals and ambitions. That's great, you know. Really like that. And look, starting out with 16 today,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? That could like give it a year from now, that could be 160. Wow, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah, a month from now, it could be 160. Give it two, three, who knows where it could go. Yeah. But like this is the thing. When you said about real estate giving you that credibility, you got
Yeah.
to, like you are doing something which can give you credibility. You are doing your podcast. And like if
Yeah.
you to like key people, like you know what I mean, really making a difference, having a clear message, you have credibility there, and that will can grow exponentially. And yeah, reaching out to different people out there, who knows who you might be speaking to, but more
Yeah.
importantly, who knows who might be listening. Just takes one.
Exactly. Exactly. And like in that same breath, right? But like the real estate, it taught me a lot. But like with the credibility thing, I didn't realize that the podcast could be something credible, right? That's why I didn't treat it as something that I should put all my efforts to. I was just like, I'll just grow it on the side, right? And it
Mm.
wasn't until I realized, like, hey, like I have an audience. And then I also realized like I have a lot of skills to make me good on a one-to-one. Like there's different types of salespeople, right? Or like just people in general in the communication styles. There's like a one-on-one approach, kind of like what we're doing now. And then there's also like a one-to-many. And it's like, imagine, if I'm a top realtor in my area, I'm selling maybe like 30 houses a year. Just
Mm.
because the average price of a home is so high, I'm probably selling close to 30 houses a year, right? That's 30 families about. Let's say average family is, four, 30 times four, right? That's like 120 people that I'm helping out. But it's like, imagine I grow the podcast. I can turn that 120 to 120,000 people that I can help out, right? 120,000 families that I can help out. I could help so many more people. And then so I started realizing that. And I was like, yeah, this is definitely where I have to put my efforts in because this is going to help me impact. As I said, I don't want it to just be a weekly episode or even if I go to twice a week, double episodes. I want it to be a movement. I want to create a community. I want to get people like the whole name behind it, like walk to wealth, like want people to walk together, right? Because I'm still on the journey and we can all just walk together, walk in arms and kind of go to forward together.
Yeah, like this is the thing. I think if like seeing as you're at the sort of beginning of this journey, and like if you can like also document it alongside it, not if it takes away from your sort of focus and energy from the podcast, then don't do it. But if you do say a YouTube channel or basically put it on your podcast, just a episode once a week or once every 2 weeks, like saying this is what has happened over the last a 10-day report, say. This is my 10-day
Mm.
report, and this is what we've done over this 10 days. Bam. So like people know, and you can like go tie it still into your podcast. See, there you go. Like, there you go. But yeah, if you do something like that, I think it could really get some people really excited. Like, and it's going to be a very interesting time at this present because one of the things when we're in a bull market, every SOB is a financial genius. When we're in a bear market, yeah, you begin to like figure out who some of the people out there who might have that moniker of a charlatan. And let's just
Yeah.
in the realm of sort of finance, like either finance YouTube or basically just finance, real estate, and everything like that, which is being sort of broadcasted over the World Wide Web. I think there are a number of people which are now being, oh wait, I thought you were smarter than this. Nah. It's like, and yeah, I thought you were more honest than this.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just say there's a number of people, dare I say it, FTX, who are like, yeah, say no more. You know what I mean? You know,
Yeah, definitely not. Definitely, it's so easy to act as if someone you're not. Not I feel like that's something that's probably played people forever, right? Because we're social beings, right? We always want to fit in. We always want to connect. Want to be social. But it's
yes,
like now it's even easier to do stuff through social media, right? Everyone's just so like in a highlight reel all the time. So it's even without a podcast, right? You could come off as someone you're not. Just post a couple photos by a nice car. It's like no one knows it's not yours,
yeah,
right? But now with podcasting you already look professional because you have a microphone too close to your face. So people are gonna trust your word a little bit more. So it's like now it's like, you gotta to be even more careful. You have to really do your due diligence, your homework to see who's giving you this advice, right? I was just talking to my uncle the other day about, he was like, oh, home prices gotta have to crash or whatever. And he was like, I know they are because, I heard it on the news. It's like, you know, normally I would argue with him, right? I would go back and forth and tell him here's why the market isn't going to crash. Here's the evidence supporting it. Here's what the data is showing. But it's like, there's a quote that I've learned and I'm still practicing, implementing it into my life, but it's do not cast your pearls before swine, right? And pretty much your pearls, that's your wisdom, your knowledge, your time, your energy, your love, your passion, your efforts, whatever maybe your valuables, right?
mhm,
Before people, do not cast that before people that are by swine, meaning people that aren't receptive of it, people that aren't appreciative of it. Like for example, every time my uncle comes to the house, he's always telling me the house is going to crash, and even though I tell him otherwise, right? And his evidence is because he just knows everything, and I'm actually using evidence, right? So it's like I'm essentially having an argument for no reason. Like my ego in me wanted to be right, and having to take away. It is like I was like last time he came to the house and he brought something up about the housing market. I was like, you know better than I do. And that's it. I didn't argue, and I think he was expecting us to go back and forth a little bit. And I was like, no, you know better than I do. And that
mhm.
was that. And I just walked upstairs and continued doing whatever I was doing.
Yeah, you got to sometimes remember people will take that little nugget of information that they're either on a negative stance just so they can either procrastinate or give them that excuse to take no action. So, like when they come to you and say these things, and you like, oh no, don't, they might be looking for a reason why to like, oh yeah, you're right, I'm going to jump on it. Or if you haven't said the quote unquote magic key thing, they're about no, you see, yeah, you're young, you're young, you're foolish, you're an idiot. It's like so they won't take any action for themselves, or they'll try to use it. And I'm not saying this is what your uncle's going to like do it
Mhm.
to like go, okay, yeah, let me drag you back a little. You like you've got to watch family and friends which sometimes do that. It's not
Mhm.
done like it's not done out of spite or selfishness most of the times. It's just done sometimes out of trying to keep you safe, if you get what I mean.
Yeah. And I love the word safe, right? Because it's like it's such a subjective word. Like what is safe? For example, someone might tell you, you have to go to college and get yourself a stable job, and then you see Meta just drop 11,000 employees. What happened to Zillow back what? I think it was in they lost like in just a quarter alone when they had the flipping company within Zillow. They
Yeah.
lost 300,000 employees in a single quarter. That entire division, because they were doing the iBuying, they thought they could have a method to do that across the country. Now realizing like, hey, you can't do that. Boom, a whole division got entirely wiped out, right? What happened to all those people that took the secure, the safe route, right? Like, what is safety really? What do you define as safe? And a lot of the time, these people that give you advice, whether it's friend, family, maybe, it might be a teacher, it could be a lot of different things, but they give you this advice that's safe, that's not really safe, is in someone else's hands, right? The only way to have true safety, true security, I feel personally, is to take matters into your own hands. Right. And I feel like that is the only way. And so, like for me, the three things I'm striving for is time freedom, financial freedom, and location freedom. So I know that no matter what happens, I will always be good. My family will always be good. The ones that I love will always be good because I took it into my own hands and didn't rely on the next person, the next man to do what I should be taking care of. Right.
Mm. If you can get time freedom, you generally have financial freedom. Pretty much immediately. Location freedom, that's another thing altogether. Like, because sometimes we don't necessarily have that, because if you
Yeah.
partner, spouses, or just like location of family, it can like somewhat restrict your movements. But uh, with regards to safety, I always see like when people like, I want to be safe, it's a case of I want to be comfortable. I don't want to like get out that sort of comfort zone of my life where it might be uncomfortable, it might be painful for a time, but that pain's not going to last forever. But if you put that yourself into that realm of unsafe or discomfort, I
Yeah.
think that's where the greatest period of growth comes from for most people. I think people just sometimes don't actually realize it.
Yeah, I think to change up a little bit, like slightly different way of saying kind of what you're saying, I think we should change the word with comfortable. People don't want comfortable, they want complacency, right? Because you can find comfort in discomfort, right? You can find comfort in stressful situations. There's people that perform very well under stressful situation. They can remain calm. They can be comfortable in despite the discomfort. People want complacency. They don't want to grow. They don't want to better themselves. They don't want, and they'll say they do, but their actions speak otherwise, right? And as you know, actions speak louder than words. And people really don't want the thing. They don't want to go to the gym. They don't want to eat healthy. They don't want to start a business. They don't want to do the things that they know are going to benefit them. And not everyone should be an entrepreneur. You could always be an entrepreneur within someone else's company, right? It takes a lot to, mentally too, to be in charge of someone paying other people and all these other things, right? But it's like a lot of people, it's not comfortable they're searching for. It's complacency. They don't want to stretch themselves, right? It's because, as I said, but just playing sports, right? My whole life, it's like you'll realize, like, you know, getting into full pads and doing bear crawls across turf in 95-degree weather, like that's very discomfortable. We have to find comfort despite all that stuff, like all these little things that you learn through playing sports, right? And
Mm.
you can, or martial arts maybe does, it's the same thing, right? And so it's like finding that comfort within the discomfort, right? And realize that people, they just want to stay the same. They don't want to grow, they don't want to move, right? They just want to stay complacent for the most part.
Mm. I have to ask, like, because you've like played team sports and everything like this, and you're like, oh yeah, there are people just rather than seeking discomfort, they're seeking complacency. Like, when you have people like that on your team, what would be the best? Like, what have you found in your experience has been the best method to either shake them out of it or, like, yes, find a new direction?
Yeah, I'd say for me, so I'm someone that tends to be relatively harsh on people, but just because like I'm pretty straightforward, right? I also in some ways kind of lack empathy, but I also genuinely hate excuses. Right. So it's like you have to be empathetic sometimes, but it's also, is it like, a moment of vulnerability, or are they just making excuses? It's a fine line to kind of cross, because you could come to some people, I come off like very harsh, very, blunt sometimes. But it's also too, it's like, for example, it's like I was talking to somebody, and I'm also a hyper optimist as well. So I really don't like excuses. I think you could find a way for most things, right? So that also doesn't help the fact that I'm kind of straightforward, but I also think that there's always an opportunity, right? So
I'm
it
sorry,
comes
that's like going, man, you really suck. But you know what? With the right movements, you can go out there and get it.
like bro, you are terrible, but like you could accomplish everything you want in life. But you have to first realize that you're terrible, right? So it's like it doesn't make sense. It's weird like that. But for example, I was at I still work on a restaurant on the side, right?
Mm.
And that's how I'm supporting everything right that I can do now, right? And I was talking to a guy, and he works there, he's a server, and he was like, oh, my life, is so much, it was harder than yours, because I moved here when I was 15 to start working from Mexico. So it's like easy for you, you were born here. And I was like, bro, I know a guy younger than me that came from India and is making 100,000 a year right now. Now mind you, I told you I'm 21,
Mhm.
right? He's 20, he just picked up an Airbnb. I was like, you came here at 15 to start working. When you started working, I was in Pampers. and the internet was still around, there's no excuse that you should not be where you want to be in life. Because as I said, I firmly believe, right, you could be anywhere you want in 5 years. And usually, when you haven't accomplished what you want to accomplish, you usually, are missing one or two key connections, right?
Mm.
With one or two key connections, you'll probably be able to accomplish whatever it is that you're looking for. It's just like, okay, who's that person, right? And it's hard to find. It's not easy, but it's simple. A lot of this stuff is simple, and people tend to overcomplicate a lot of things. And by overcomplicating, that's where the excuses come in, right? And so he was trying to tell me like, yeah, my life's harder than you because I came from Mexico, and I was like, yeah, I was literally in Pampers. I couldn't speak any languages, and you were out here working and you decided to spend your money, waste your money. He was saying like for the past 10 years, he was like going to clubs and then spending money. It's like that's your no one else's fault but your own. And he was trying to make excuses. And then like one of my other friends was there. It's like, yeah, John, he's kind of like she was trying to translate for me, but it's like no, like this is I'm saying it how I meant it because this is how it's supposed to be come across. And she was like, yeah, he could be very harsh like that. Sometimes he's harsh like that with me. And that, but it's like someone has to play the I guess the bad guy. Am I the bad guy for trying to give solid advice, or it's like,
Like this is the thing. Like, okay, what especially in the world we live in today. Now, if you are truthful with most people,
yeah,
because okay, the vast majority of people are not here to take responsibility for their lives or actions for a myriad of things. Like if you start to highlight that by going, yeah, you're not doing this, you could have been doing that, doing this, doing that. The spotlight, when you're in the spotlight on stage, it's a warm place to be. And the more spotlights you put on like flaws in someone's life, and when they know deep down it's their fault, they will get mad. Like they'll get mad at you, but they're really mad at themselves.
mhm,
And they'll never admit it to you. And you know what I mean? It's but it's one of those things. If you give it out, you've got to always be prepared to take it, you know?
yeah.
And
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Because that's what I wish someone was with me. That's how I like to be talked to in a way. It's like that. As I said, I grew up playing football, and it's like that coaching. It's like it's never like, hey, go run a mile around the football field. It's like, oh, you guys want to come late to practice? On the line, goal line now, bear cross, run. Right, like that's. But it's like also too. It's like there's a reason for it. It's with good intention. So do you want bad advice with, a warm voice on the other side of it, or do you want great advice with a tough voice, right? At the end of the day, it's with good intention. Like, oh, you should have never spent your money. You should have been doing X, Y, Z. Someone has to tell them that, right? And they may know deep down, but it's like if you knew, then why do you do it, right? Because then people say, oh, but I had no choice, and then they get into that victim mentality that, oh, but there's always a choice, especially when you're operating with a mindset of abundance, right? Where I believe firmly, like where we are today is an accumulation of our past thoughts. So
Mm.
in order to get to where we want to get to in the future, we have to change our thoughts now. So it's like, what thoughts did you have in place, right? What were you thinking? Who were you around? What were you feeding into your mind and your life and your body that led you to be at that situation where you were at that point in time?
No, like this is the thing. Abundance mindset. I love the fact that you've got that. And like this is the thing. If you've got if you're in survival mode, and I've sat down over the course of time and like working things out. And I've been in survival mode where if you went 1 to 10, I'll go, yeah, I must have been at 15, 16 time. Because like the difference is with abundance mindset, you got, yes, I can plan for the future because there's going to be always this, that, the other. You play the game of life in the here and now, and you don't actually think about the future. And like going with regards to getting out of a survival mindset, it takes a long time, depending where you actually fall on that spectrum to sort of bring it down. Because there's times where it's like, what is that normal? Normal for me is I don't know. It's on a different level. I do have more of an abundance mindset in there, but it's still tagged with that survival mindset still with me. But like the whole thing is, if we had a conversation when I was 21 and you were like 21, I'd most really have a host of excuses why this and that, and I can't do this and can't do that. It's taken a long time and a lot of hard work on my part. And I know there are going to be some people which are on that path of journey. There are some people which will never be able to sort of come out of that. And there'll be some people which can slowly come into that realm and go, yes, you know what? The world is full of abundance. Abundance opportunities, like whatever that might be, like, you know what I mean? Financial, like sites, like travel, like meeting people. Or, yeah, you can like not have it.
Yeah.
You know?
There's a quote that I hold near and dear to my heart. It comes from a freestyle. It's and if life was easy, it wouldn't be worth living.
Mm,
God gives his best soldiers the worst missions. Right. So it's like that's something like whenever things get hard, and like I'm currently one of those times where it's hard. Do I ever show it? No, because I know like right now, like for example, I just came off of a year where financially it was probably my worst year in a while ever, probably. And like I'm burning through everything, but it's like I'm in that phase where it's like, although I'm burning through a lot of my resources, my capital, it's like I'm also gained a clarity so I can come into 2023 with so much excitement, so much energy, so much passion, right? Because I've gained clarity as to what it is that I want to put my efforts into. And it's like there's so many other things that I've learned throughout the years. For example, like Zig Ziglar, if you help enough people get what they want, eventually you will get what you want, right? Right. Coming from service, right? Like people, if you come from contribution, people want to help you back. Eventually people will help you do more than you're paid, and eventually you'll be paid more than what you do, right? Listening to people like Joe Rogan, reading all these books, reading all these quotes. It's like, and then also too as well, I can't forget like having a strong faith, right? And right, faith is having belief in things we have not seen yet. I know it's there, it's coming, but it's like I just got to stay faithful. I got to stay, disciplined. I got to stay focused and getting after it. And it's like there's a quote I heard, not a quote, a verse this morning I seen on somebody else's story, but just so happens to play into all this. It was like, no weapon formed against me shall prosper, right? It's like when you know all these things and you have and believe all those things, it's like, you know, I, I understand the scarcity mindset because I come from it, but I know that it's possible to come out of it, right? You, as you said, you're in a transition phase where you're coming out of it, right? I've seen all these people around me that's like are making so much money, are doing so many things. It's like we have the same amount of hours. How did they get there? And instead of focusing on my situation and why it sucks, why it's bad, it's focusing on, you know, how do I get to where I want to get to? What do I need to do? What do I need to be? Who do I need to become in order to achieve all the things that I've dreamed of, right? Not about making $1 million, about becoming a person that can make $1 million, right? What person do you need to step into? Is that someone that's confident? Is that someone that's well spoken? Is that someone that's intelligent, articulate? Like, what do you need to do to transform into that person? And then act as if you're already that person.
mm.
And the path in front of you will start kind of, making itself out on its own.
Yeah, like this is the thing. Motivational speaker Les Brown, like when
Mm-hmm.
it talks about, yeah, to like when he made his first $1 million, it was the hardest $1 million he ever did make. I'm paraphrasing here because he didn't have the mindset for it. Once he hit that first million, then it was just like, yeah, the doorways opened to everything else. I think sometimes if you like trying to find the path onto the next level is difficult when you don't have anyone who's walked that path before you. But if you manage to like find a little path here and a little path there to get you along the way, I I don't know when you sort of step into that realm of nirvana, but one day you look up and you look around, you go, "Ooh, wait a second." Things have come my way, and like, yeah, I not so much the good times have arrived, but yeah, that next level has come to you with all the like all the hardships, joy, pain, and yeah,
I think
fantastic opportunities will come from that.
yeah, and another point too, it's like when you put in a GPS when you're going to somewhere you don't know, right? You don't start off by putting in what's the first turn,
Mm,
right? You start off by putting in the final destination. Most people don't know where they're going, or they have a very general view of where they're going. Like if I said I want to go to New York City, well, where in New York City you want to go to, right? That's a big city. Or if you want to go to, Austin or Dallas or Los Angeles. It's like these are some big cities. Where on earth do you want to go in the city? You want to go to in the north end, in the west side of the city? You want to go downtown, like where people have these general, or do I want to go to Texas? Well, where in Texas? That's the massive state. Most people are shooting for their goals and they're putting in their GPS. Hey, I just want to go to Texas,
Yeah.
and wonder why they never achieve, get to where they want to get to in life. They don't have the final destination clearly enough. They don't have the address, the zip code written
Yeah.
down.
No, the final clear picture. And like the whole thing is, look, with when it comes to like grand plans and designs, it's like, yes, I would like to have X, Y, and Z happen. You go, right. So you start out you with your like grand adventure and you're going at it. As you say, you don't know what like when the first right turns come in, the next turn, or where that GPS might be taking you. But like by the time you get to your final destination, it might be, yeah, you get X, Y, and I. It's like going like, and you go, right. And it could be something, there'll be an element which is completely different. For example, we're like going back to when we were first having this conversation, real estate. You're gonna be like become an authority in this, so you could be able to have speaking gigs, and that's like right. It's like going, this is like New York City, real estate street, as again, but
Yeah.
next to real estate streets, podcast street. And I got, yeah, real estate. Oh, wait a second. I've never seen this neighborhood before, but
Yeah.
here we go, you know?
Yeah, and definitely too. And with that real estate stuff, a lot of the stuff that we learn along the way, it's trying to like reflect. And so let's say we did make a wrong turn, whether it's wrong or right. I don't think it's wrong. I think it was for a reason because with real estate, it taught me a lot of things about like how to structure my morning, how to get around the right people, how to mastermind, how to network, how to run a business. Because Keller Williams has a lot of trainings that are more like business oriented. It's not just sticking signs in a yard and saying that says for sale, right? It's a lot of business principles that they teach. It's like incorporating a lot of that now into like how I do things with the podcast and how I organize my stuff with the podcast and finding out how to transfer it over. So it's like I wasn't driving down real estate street, didn't really know where I was going, not knowing I wanted to go to 123 podcast Ave, right? And now that it's like I'm finding that direction more and more, now I know that I want to get to, 525 podcast street or something like that. I don't know, but it's like I don't know what the next turn is, but when you put in something to a GPS, what does it do? It calculates. And
Mm,
if you take a wrong turn or if you misstep, right, or if there's traffic, what does it do? It just recalibrates. It
mm,
always reroutes, right? So kind of just be like a GPS and just when life throws a curveball or something, just reroute.
yeah. And like this is the thing, like you bring up an important point. Like, yeah, I think some people when they go into a job, they just see it as a job and like they don't actually see the possible golden nuggets or golden bricks of what can be pulled out of that particular job and be built like put into your like building a bright and sunny future. As you say, yeah, oh, you learn more about business by doing that job rather than just putting down signs. And I think there are many people like going, yeah, ah, fuck that shit job. I don't need that job. It's like, yeah, doesn't pay much or anything like this. It's like going, right, but do that job for 18 months and you might have like maybe gain 5 years of business experience over the next person. But far be it for me to say that. I doubt if anyone's gonna pick up and listen to me.
No, definitely, but like you're actually spending a lot of good game because like now we have the quiet quitting movement where everyone's just like, quietly quitting, and so they're not quitting, but they're not really putting all their effort, but like there's not really doing much. But then it's like, it's like by not putting your all into something, not only are you letting the employer down, but you're letting yourself down. It's like why are you even there? Just if it really, like it's something you really hate and your employer doesn't appreciate what you do and stuff like that, it's like, okay, I understand. What's the next step?
Yeah.
How do we get out of this? How do we make this better? Is that finding a new job? Is that applying to 20 different places all in the same day? Right? Is it walking in every single job in that street and saying, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Who's hiring?" And walking around with handing out, resumes. Is it reaching out to all your friends from LinkedIn that you went to college with or you went to high school with? Is
Mm,
reaching out to them like, "Hey, I'm looking for a job. Do you have any connections?" What it is that you have to do to get you to the place that you want to get to? Because clearly, if you're going to quiet quit the place that you're at currently, isn't where you want to be. And most people just stay there and that's it. No, there's no game plan. It's just, I'm gonna just stay here and be miserable. That's it.
yeah. like this is the thing with quiet quitting. If that's the only thing they're doing, they're not doing any sort of like side gig. It's like, look, I need to have X amount of money coming in, so but to keep my side gig going, so it can become my main gig. Then I kind of look at it and go, you know what? Fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, but most
Yeah,
people aren't.
yeah, but this is the whole thing. Like, if it's the only thing they're doing, if that's the only thing in life, they yeah, they're quiet quitting at that job, but they're also quiet quitting on themselves. That
Mm.
sort of that that vein of ambition, that passion,
Mm.
desire. And once you start doing that,
It's like
mm,
you're accepting fate. That's it. Like, this is all I'll ever become. So I'm just gonna sit here and, not put my all into this job and just be a sucky employee because this is all that I'll ever amount to, right? That's pretty much what you're saying when you're quietly quitting. Essentially, it's like, hey, it's like, especially if you don't have anything on the side, right? This is for like the people that are like just quietly quitting and not doing anything else, right? But like if you have, a side gig or a side business or something or an idea, right? Even if it's just a thought, right? If you have a seed, you know you're good. But if it's just quietly quitting with nothing else, it's like, what are you doing?
yeah, like I get this vibe about you, John. Like I might be wrong, but like, yeah, like when you come across these people who've got that vibe going on and you know it, do you tend to be like, hey, stay the hell away from me? I don't need your energy in my life. Or do you like go, hey, come on, pick like make that change? I think I know which one it is.
I can't find myself to, I can't find it in me to try to make conversation and small talk with people that don't want to better themselves. It's hard. It's like I'm so growth minded. I'm so focused. Not saying that I'm better than anyone, but it's
Mhm.
like I'm just so focused on trying to grow and better myself and self improve and develop and further my path and further my career and further on move along in this journey. So like sit across from someone that just like it's like and doesn't want to really move. It's hard, honestly, and it's hard to fake it because it's like I don't want to be someone I'm not, right? Just to have a small conversation. It's just like I'd rather not have a conversation with you.
uh,
Honestly.
no, no, I hear you. I hear you. Like this is the thing. I get that vibe from you, John. And look, there's nothing wrong with that because this is the thing. I often look at people's energy and the energy they bring on a sort of day-to-day basis. Now, if you're a up person, you can infect people with up
Positivity.
energy. Yeah.
Hmm.
Just like, oh yeah, I feel so much better.
Like you before the podcast started. You have great energy. You're up, positive. I came in the call. I was like, okay. Started smiling.
Oh, like, thank you. I'll send you a check in the post. Yeah, don't cash it yet. But yeah,
1, 2, 3 podcast street.
yeah. But like the whole thing is when you have a realm of negativity which someone gives off, uh, then like a hard day becomes that little bit harder. A good
Mhm.
day becomes that little bit drearier. It's just like no, please, like step to the side. Like there might be like if it's like yeah, shit's going on badly at home and everything like that. Like hey, if you need to talk, cool. But if it's just you're that person's on that general page of everything's shit and nothing's gonna go right for me. No, 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 no. They have to go.
Yeah, definitely. It's like because it's so cliche because everyone says it, but it's so true. Like the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around, right? So when you
Mm,
start spending a lot, these time around people, and then you'll realize that their mannerisms, the way they speak, the way everything you start to adopt those without realizing. That's the scariest part, right? So if you're spending time with the wrong people, slowly but surely you're going to become those people. And the worst part about it is that you'll never realize it. But the best part about it is, right, in that same breath, that if you spend it with good people, with people that and not I wouldn't want to say good people who are focused on positivity and bettering themselves, right, and so become a success oriented, right? You spend time with those people, and then it's like slowly but surely you won't realize it, but you'll start becoming like them as well, right? So it's like a double-edged sword where it could either go far left very quickly,
mhm.
or far right in your favor.
Yeah. No, building that team, building that like strong crew around you.
That unit, right?
Absolutely, it is everything because, like, dear me, when the times get hard, and they do,
Yeah.
you know what I mean. If you can like turn to your left, turn to your right, and you know you've got some like
Some
good people.
soldiers next to you.
Yeah, I look put it this way: you can take off over a lot of territory with five people. I tell you that now.
Yeah.
You know, it's just got to be the right five people. Now, John, I have to ask, like, what is your like? You've got epic plans for 2023. You've
Yeah.
got you've got this game plan I sense for the next 5 years. But like, okay, if there was something you could achieve in the next 12 months, like, so if we were having this conversation on the
Yeah.
20th of like December 2023, what would that be?
If I have to do just one,
One, two, you tell me.
right? So one of my big goals for next year, right, is to have 100,000 downloads for the podcast, right? So I'm a long ways away, but I feel like the effort that I'm going to put into this upcoming year is going to be, not too many putting in the amount of input that I'm going to be putting in, right? I'm going to step on the gas, right? So that's one of my big goals, right? The next one from there is, as I said, hosting a successful virtual summit. Because if I do a successful virtual summit one time, that's going to open the door to doing another one. And the amount of, you know, authority that I'm going to gain in my field is going to boost my credibility, is going to boost everything. I want to do a TED Talk as well. That's another goal that I have. Um, and it's not as hard as most people think. It's kind of just a game of applying a little bit. And having your stuff together
Mm,
and knowing how to, the hard part is finding who to do you have to reach out to pitch. That's the hard part. But if you find the right person to pitch, reach out to and pitch, you send them a pretty, well thought out email. Yeah, you have an all right chance, especially because I have a podcast. So it's like there's already, video footage of me speaking, right? So it's like I have some credibility. Like you could look up my podcast, see all the videos and stuff like that. Now that I'm being a guest on other shows, it's like, and I have a one pager. So it's like, when I send that written up email, I'm gonna look a little certified. So when they see another, and so that's a goal right there. But really more than anything, I'd say the probably two most important goals is to become a better version of myself than I am today. Right. Because I feel like this year, at least financially and resource wise, in terms of like capital and stuff like that, I went down. So it's like, but like I've been able to grow as a person so much. Right. And so I've been investing in myself. So like next year to see the fruits of those efforts, right? The results of those efforts that I put into this year. That's what I want to see really next year. And two, it's like helping more people. I haven't put a quantify, like I haven't quantified the amount of people I want to help, right? But I've been spending a lot of time recently. Like one of my boys named Darren. Shout out to Darren. Hopefully you hear this podcast. But I've been, every time I have a new idea, I run it by him. Because
mm,
when I think of my ideal avatar, he is the person that comes to mind. If I could like have you they talk about marketing and branding, like who's your ideal client avatar? Like who's the one person you want to help? If you could, picture somebody in your brain, and he's the first person I thought of. And so it's like, when I get these new ideas and stuff like that, it's like, all right, this is gonna help him and this is gonna support him because I know if he likes it, then at least 100 other people like him like it. And that's how I'm gonna really turn this from just a podcast into a movement, into a community. It's like I get him to mess with it, then he just enjoys and supports what I'm doing so much that that's gonna attract other people like him to join, and then just focus on like, okay, how can I continue to help and serve you guys more, and just
mm.
come from contribution. And it's not about the passive income, right? That people like to talk about. It's about passive impact. How many people's lives can you change while you're sleeping? Because if you can change people's life while you're sleeping, you'll make more money than you ever knew what to do with. So it's like next year gonna be big on like how do I help more people?
Mm, excellent. And I have to ask because, yeah, how do you plan to get the 100,000 downloads?
So part of it is going to be I have a minimum of 240. That's the bare minimum podcast guest appearances. My actual goal is 300. The cherry on top is 360, right? I could do 360 podcasts next year, right? That, and I'm only gonna do people that, as I said, like I told you before we started recording, people that are in alignment with me. Whether it's someone that I had on my show that they had on their show, or someone
Mhm.
that's in my niche, in my industry, in the entrepreneurship space, right? That's the only podcast I'm going on. Um, and so I'm reaching out to these people and seeing if we can connect. The summits is going to be a big help because now it's going to be not just my, credibility. It's going to be all these speakers bringing their audiences, and I'm going to be the common denominator. So it's, some people are obviously going to come back into Walk to Wealth, right? And so those are going to be like the two main like plays, and then the third play, which is like a more of a like a long term play. So I created a Dream 100 list. It's like the top 100 people that I would want to work with or collab with or have on a podcast as a guest. And so I followed all of them on Instagram. And so what I'm doing is each day I made all of them my favorites on Instagram. So if you look on my feed, it's only like entrepreneur stuff for the most part and personal finance stuff,
Yeah.
and like just commenting on all their stuff. And so not all of them run their own social media accounts, but some of them do. And if my name pops up enough time when I eventually ask them to hop on the show, they're gonna want to be on the show, right? And they're gonna want to help because I've been a valuable contributor to their community. It's not like I was like, oh, hop on my show. I'd love to have you. Hey, I'm a big fan. Come on my show. It's like, I've been contributing. I've been, uh, communicating with their other people in the community and kind of making a name for myself. And so it's like when I finally ask that person and I reach out, they'll be more likely to say yes. And as I get them to say yes, and the more credibility from the virtual summit, that's gonna boost my credibility. So then I can reach out to even more successful people. And as you probably already know, usually when you have a successful person on your podcast, it doesn't really boost your numbers that much, but it'll boost my credibility, allowing me to reach out to more people. And then the speaking opportunities that I'm doing from podcasts hopefully lead into actual speaking opportunities and just funnel everything back into the show. That is my plan so far for getting that to 100,000 in 1 year.
Uh-huh. Fantastic. I'm loving the energy and loving the positivity. I love, and you know what? I do believe you've got the will and drive to make it happen. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Now,
Oh,
I said it earlier, right? You're only one or two connections away. I hop on one podcast or talk to one person. That's all it takes.
yeah, indeed it does. Indeed it does. Now, this will be the final question. And like, yeah. Now, I I have to reveal I'm a being of supreme cosmic power, and I can grant you one wish and one wish alone. But before you say a damn thing, because like I can tell you're tricky. You might not know what Die Hard is, but you're tricky. Yeah. No wishing for infinite wishes. No writing down things on a list of paper, make everything come true on this, like on the list. No wishing for world peace. No wishing for a cure for COVID. I had to draw on the powers of Dolly Parton and Beyonce on that. That's some dark magic you don't want to mess with. No. If I can grant you one wish, what would it be?
The one wish is that I pass on generational wisdom to those whose lives I've been able to impact. And as I said, I haven't really quantified the amount of people that I want to help. I don't want to help like a million people or like a billion people or whatever. It's like I want to help as many people as I can. But with the generational wisdom side of things, right? The whole idea behind it is that everyone talks about generational wealth. The thing that sucks about generational wealth is the average inheritance only lasts 3 generations, right? Why? Because tough times breed strong men breed easy times breed weak men, and then the cycle continues, right? It's a cycle. But if you have generational wisdom, right? It doesn't matter what life throws your way. It doesn't matter if you get a lawsuit. It doesn't matter if everything is stripped from you, right? You lose everything. You will always be able to get it back and then some, right?
Mm.
Because you have that what they can't take from you what's up here, right? So at the very least, uh that would probably be my one wish that every person whose life I walked into, right? I'm able to spew in some generational wisdom that they can then take on and implement and better their lives with.
Outstanding. Mm. Just make the number 1,000. It's small, but if you can do that to 1,000 people, and 1,000 people, and those people could do 1,000, and then and again and again and again and again.
That's the whole road.
Boom. Just have that impact on 1,000 people. That's all. Yeah. But okay, John, I got to say thank you for coming on the podcast today. You have been a joy, a pleasure, a delight, and a disappointment in the same. Doesn't know Die Hard. He was almost perfect. Almost. Damn you, John. Like yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Come on. Come on.
Well, we all have our shortcomings, right?
It was almost a perfect guess. But John, can you tell the lovely people how they can find you out there on these interwebs?
Yeah. So one thing that I'm helping right now, a lot of people, as I said, want to get into entrepreneurship. So I created a free training called The Beginner's Guide to Entrepreneurship for anyone that want to take matters into their own hands, right, and turn their side hustles into something that's more than just a little side hustle, right? So that's gonna. I mean, I'll send you the link, but it's gonna be pretty much there or Walk to Wealth pretty much everywhere. IG, the podcast, right? If it's not the guide, go check out the podcast because I said I got a lot of big things planned. So make sure to stick along. And if you want to join me on the Walk to Wealth, that'll be the best place to find me.
John, it has been a pleasure, an honor to have you here today. Thank you for coming on. I'll put all the information into the show notes, the description. So yeah, do seek him out. Yeah, do connect with him. And yes, drop down maybe a few suggestions to him. But that's another story. That's almost a personal vibe. But anyway.
DM me any movie suggestions.
You've opened up the gateway now, son. I'd like to say thank you to you, my friends, my life warriors, for sticking with us to the end of the show. Please stay well, stay safe, be awesome, be excellent, be fantastic. Be all the positive bees in the world and then some. Have a great day, guys. Yes. Peace. Yeah, and we on.